What's up, everybody? It's your boy aka Big Zeke, coming at y'all with another weekly inspirational thought. I pray that y'all have been well, and we're going to jump right into this week's thought, which is entitled, Don't Try to Force Everyone to Love or Help You in a Certain Way, especially when you don't love yourselves that way. I know it's a lengthy title, but it's well worth it, okay? I pray that y'all have been doing well. Sorry that I didn't post last week for those who watch on a regular basis. Had some things going on, but I pray that you all continue to keep me in your prayers as I can continue to keep you all in my prayers, and we're going to go from there, all right? Got a few reference scriptures this week. As always, they'll be listed in the comment section below, and we're going to get right into those. The first comes from Matthew chapter 22, verse 39. I'm going to be reading all of these in the NIV version. The first reads, Matthew 22 and 39 says, And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. The next is coming from Galatians chapter 5, verse 14. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command, love your neighbor as yourself. The next comes from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Okay? Those are the reference scriptures, and we're going to jump right into this week's thoughts. So, that was a lengthy title, and I know it, but we get to this point where we try to force people to love us a certain way. We try to force people to acknowledge us a certain way or to do certain things in our lives to prove their love for us. And we have these long lists of demands and things like that. When in all actuality, that's not the way that we should be trying to get people to love us. First of all, the Bible told us flat out, love your neighbors as yourselves. So if you don't love yourself enough to do some of the things you're asking others to do, that's messed up. But we'll get into that in a little bit, okay? God bless me with two thoughts for this week, and the first reads as follows. And these are lengthy reads, y'all, so bear with me, okay? God put a lot on my mind this week, all right? There's nothing wrong with setting a standard for how we want to be treated or loved in our lives by others. But when we don't love ourselves in that same way, then we're being nothing more than hypocrites. We were instructed by God to love our neighbors, basically everyone around us, like we love ourselves. But if we don't love ourselves enough to hold ourselves to the standards that we try to make other people meet in our lives, then we're 100% wrong. And I just said that a second ago. How do I know this? Well, here's a couple reference scriptures. Leviticus 19 and 18 said, Do not seek revenge or bear grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself, for I am the Lord. This is the Lord talking to them. Love your people as you love yourself. The next comes from Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, and poured into your lap. For with this measure you use, it will be measured unto you. And forgive me, that was Luke chapter 36, verse 37 and 38. Forgive me for that. That was Luke chapter 6, verse 37 and 38. They said that. Galatians chapter 6 and 7 reads, Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. That's Galatians 6 and 7, okay? And how do all those tie into what we're talking about today? Well, simple. Everything we put out there in life, we get back, right? So if we don't love ourselves enough to check on ourselves mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, why are we trying to force everybody else to when we're not doing that for ourselves? That's unfair, right? That's not a fair thing to do. If we don't love ourselves enough to dress a certain way or look a certain way or have a certain thing, then why is it that we're putting that expectation on everybody else in our lives in order for them to be around us? That doesn't sound fair, does it? So we have to get into a mindset of Yes, it's okay to have that standard, but make sure that we're meeting the standard first ourselves before trying to enforce the standard on everybody else in our lives, because that's not fair to them. That is not fair to them. That is not fair to hold people to a standard that we're not even living ourselves. And I'm not talking about just romantic relationships either. I'm talking about friendships, business partnerships. How fair is it if I come into a business partnership and I want the business partner that I'm looking for, that I have, I want them to be responsible, on time, articulate, excuse me, but I'm not articulate. I'm never on time. I'm never organized. How can I expect these things of a business partner that I'm not bringing to the table? Same thing in a friendship. How can I expect my friends to be there for me in a time of crisis, pray for me, encourage me, when I don't take the time to encourage them? When I'm not there for them when they need me, when I'm not praying for them. That's not fair. And that's not right. That's not right for me to hold a standard that I'm not willing to live myself. That's unfair to them. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with having a standard on what you will accept in your life, but when you're not living the standard yourself, oh my God, you have become the ultimate hypocrite. And that's not fair to the people in your life or around your life, okay? So we got to be more mindful of that. And I'm saying all of us have to be more mindful of that, okay? Nothing wrong with holding a standard, but we got to make sure we live in the standard that we're trying to get everybody else to live through. And that's a big part of, what the title entails. Stop trying to force people to love you a certain way when you don't love yourself that way. You can't expect somebody else to love you enough to be there for you and help you and talk you through things when you don't do it for yourself and you don't do it for them. How can you expect them to do it for you? That's not right. It's not right. And the final point that God blessed me with, He only gave me two this week, but they're lengthy, okay? And I'm going to read the second one. When God gave us the command through Jesus to love our neighbors as ourselves, He never gave us a long list of do's and don'ts on how to love them or how they should love us. He never told us, oh, okay, well, when you love your neighbor, make sure that they're doing this, and this for you. He never said that. I never read that in the Bible. He never gave a description on X, Y, and Z to do, all these man-made isms and schisms to do when it comes to loving your neighbor. Okay? Instead, He simply instructed us to love them as we love ourselves. So we must learn to keep that in mind at all times, especially when we're dealing with things, because sometimes if we're struggling and someone can't help the way that we want them to, or they don't show a certain amount of affection that we're expecting them to, or that we want them to, then in that moment we get angry and we take that anger out on them unfairly and unjustly, and we push them away. But we got to understand this: people only know what they're taught. People only know to do what they're taught to do, and unfortunately some people aren't shown how to be affectionate. Some people don't know how to love, not of any fault of their own, but they were never shown. Unfortunately, some people were raised in households where affection wasn't shown, so they don't know how to show affection themselves. So you can't expect that from somebody who doesn't know it themselves. And I'm not saying that in a negative light, it's just what it is. Okay, so we have to understand that. And we have to understand that because people will do only what they know how to do, then in those difficult times, they might not know how to fully do that. But if they're trying, that's all that matters. Okay? So if they're trying, and this is a long thought, so bear with me. So they're doing what God instructed them to do, even if they're not doing it to the standard that we want them to do it, but they're doing it how they know how to do it. They're loving their neighbor as themselves, because if they only know how to love themselves enough to say I love you and nothing more, and they tell you I love you, then they're doing just what that scripture said, okay? Just because people can't always do what we want them to do or give what we want them to give or say or show what we want them to say or show in our moments of distress, that doesn't mean that they don't love us. It just means that in that moment they may not be able to do what we're asking, and that's okay. How do I know all of this that I just broke down in that one long thought, right? Galatians 5 and 14 says this: for the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. And the second, and then Matthew 22 and 39, and the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? There's not a long list of how-tos with this thing. We just have to love people as we love ourselves. So when people don't give you a certain amount of money that you need in a certain situation, or they don't give you a certain item that you need, it doesn't mean that they don't love you. It could be that they just actually don't have it in that moment. But if they're offering suggestions on how to help you get it, or they're offering their love and support through prayer, then we can't just brush that off and get mad because it's not what we need in that moment. Again, the title was don't try to force people to love or help you a certain way, especially when you don't love yourself that way, right? So just because somebody may not have $15,000 to help you put a down payment on a house in that moment, that don't mean they don't love you. That just means they ain't got $15,000. You can't get mad at that. But if they're saying, hey, I'm praying that God blesses you with a way to get that $15,000, hey, I'll take that prayer any day of the week. Fine, thank you for your prayers. I pray I get it too. Prayers. I know that materialistically, in the natural, it doesn't help me in that moment. But I know that that prayer is going to help me. The Bible talks about the prayers of the righteous availing much. So I'll take that prayer. I'll take it. We can't have this ungrateful mindset to where just because people don't help us or do what we want them to do or how we want them to do it, we can't just take that mindset and just brush away what they're trying to do in our moments of distress. Jesus instructed us to love ourselves, or love our neighbors as ourselves. So if we don't love ourselves to a certain standard, then we can't try to force that standard on anybody else. So knowing this, we got to stop trying to force people to love us a certain way or help us the way we want to be helped, especially when we're not doing it for ourselves. That's all for this week, y'all. I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. Continue to keep me in prayers as I continue to keep you in my prayers. Love on each other. Take care of one another. Remember, we can't force somebody to live a certain standard in our lives if we're not living it ourselves. And as always, be inspired.